I said, God, these people lived a lot more honest and cleanly than me. And one thing I always learned, because the social workers always told me, if they didn't hate my guts, which some of them did, because I was a hell of a behavior case. I spent a lot of time in segregation. I spent, damaged the institutions when I was in them. Once I caused a riot and wound up locked up for that. So sometimes I was a handful, and the social workers hated me. But if they didn't hate me and they were trying their psychobabble, they'd always say, Bill, you're basically good. You got to believe in yourself. I think there was some term that Deneen would know it. One of those characters, they said, if you remember that guy, fill up your gas, give the kid a compliment. Do you remember that workshop in MacEwan University? Yeah, anyways, it's a pile of crap. But at the time, it made sense to me. I bought it. I'm entitled. I'm basically good. Well, in that graveyard, I came to the realization I wasn't basically good. That I was a thief, that I was a liar, that I was selfish. And to have that realization, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And then I started crying about that. And at that point I said, God, forgive me. And for 2 hours I confessed my sins laying on my stomach in that graveyard. And that's where I asked Christ into my life. And some people could say, maybe that was just the effect of the glue hitting you afterwards. It was in actual fact a permanent change. And when I walked out of that graveyard, I felt clean on the inside, which I never felt before. Now, I can't give you a Jimmy Swaggart story and say life was perfect. I was still an addict, although at that point I sure wasn't looking for glue. I was actually very happy with my newfound walk with Christ, and that's who I asked into my life. Another thing I haven't told you guys, when I was hitchhiking, often these evangelicals would pick me up and they'd tell me about Jesus, and some of them were ex-alcoholics, and these messages would stay with me. When I painted this one guy's dog blue and broke into his wood shack on this juvenile institution and was sniffing his glue. And he was a Salvation Army, so rather than hate on me, he said, Bill, you really need Jesus. And of course I persecuted him at the time. But those thoughts, and I remember looking at his eyes, and I remember looking at his face, even as I was causing him trouble and basically abusing his animal in his glue shop. I remember thinking he had something I didn't have. But of course I didn't ask at that time. But in the graveyard, I asked for what he had, and I did walk out clean, and I really believe that. I really believe that a ton of weight that no drug and no psychiatrist could give you was lifted off my chest. Now, I still had no life skills. I still was living outside. For about 4 days, I was walking with God, is the way I would describe it to you guys, and I was praying, and I was feeling clean and really close, and the drudgery, the marginalization, the loneliness, the poverty, it set in. And so I'd slip back into my glue. But things were different. I couldn't enjoy it now. And I was asking the Lord, I was praying, saying, Lord, how do I get off the streets? And one day I walked into a drop-in center, and I found a little tract. And it was from a group called Teen Challenge, which is a Christian drug and alcohol group. And it was a little story of a guy by the name of Nicky Cruz, who was a gang member who found Jesus. And when I found that tract, I said, that's me. I gotta find this too. And of course, when you're just living outside, you got no roots. So this Teen Challenge was in Hamilton. It had the address in the back. I went and saw my probation officer, who I saw every so often. Half the time I'd miss my appointments, but whatever. They don't throw you in jail too much if you show up at least once every 3 months and you got glue on your face. They figure you're all good.
Unless you're Brad Lowe.
Yeah, unless you're a political dissident. So anyways, I told them I want to go to Teen Challenge, and they thought, what else has this guy done? Sure, go ahead. Just call the probation officer when you get to that town. Well, it was there. When I walked in, I was so toxic that for the first 4 days, I would try to read the Bible, and there'd be little lines squiggling and stuff like that. But now I was eating healthy food. They didn't have the entitlement thing. They put me to work on day 2. As sick as I was, I had to scrub out the bathrooms. They started telling me about honesty and about repentance and about discipline. That's where things changed. I still didn't become perfect, but now I had a moral framework that I never had that was going to stay with me forever and indeed affect the rest of my life. Now, as it is, I'm sometimes a slow learner. After 4 months and after getting healthy and strong and that, I decided, maybe I don't have to serve God. Maybe I can just get a job and basically do a little bit of fornication and do a little bit of weed and, you know, just live like a normal person.